So I've got a bit of a question in that you talked about at Snappertuna there's 2 gold bocks buried on a small island, and this is where the crystal balls are also buried. Is that correct?
Yeah.
There are 2 gold bocks buried in Snappertuna.
Yeah.
And in one part of the conversation, I think you mentioned that the gold, that the Ark of the Covenant has 2 gold bocks on it. It's not the winged seraphim, but it's the, or whatever, the 2 gold bocks were on the Ark of the Covenant.
You didn't hear it from me. I can tell you about these 2 golden bocks that are buried in Snappertuna.
Yeah.
They were buried there in the year 1050.
Mm-hmm.
Because in the year 1050, the Pope in Rome has been sending one bishop from Sweden together with one Swiss mercenary army, Helvetia army, and together with the King of Sweden.
What's Helvetia? What's Vetia mean?
Vetia, I don't know. To Sweden to destroy the last of these heathen cultures. This was the last of the Crusades in the north. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
They were stamping out all of this old pagan culture all over Europe. And the last of them were sandwiched here in Finland between the Greek Orthodox system to the east, which Russia adopted in the year 987. Sweden still continued for a short period after that with a heathendom system, but 1008 they had also to get down on the knee to the Pope in Rome. So they became Christian, adopted Christianity in the year 1008, which left only Finland squeezed in between 2 enormous writing systems. Because the information is coming out from the Pope in Rome and from the Sultan actually in Istanbul through the churches. And this letter is then read out to the people in their parish church every Sunday. So, 2 writing system, we didn't have that before. It's left only Finland in between the 2. In 1050, in 987, when Russia became Greek Orthodox, these Aser inside Udenma decided to close the entrance to the Lemminkainen temple, which they blocked up very nicely for us to try now to unblock many years after, 1,000 years after. Anyway, they blocked it all up in the year 987. So the temple was closed. In the year 1050, arrived this mercenary army to kill everybody they could find. They cut down all the oak trees and destroyed everything from the old, mostly wooden heathen culture. Burned the whole place to one desert. And whatever gold they could get their hands on, they've been taken back with them to Switzerland. Before they arrive, the Pirouette family have 3 golden statues of Bock, goats. According to the saga, they should weigh 288 kilos gold each. And they used to use them for processions and put them on wagons that would be pulled by 8 live bucks. These live bucks, that's it. It's one other story there with the seal specks of one other detail. these three golden statues would be pulled around in processions. So before they run away to the north, to get away from this invading army, two of these golden bocks they had been burying in a place called Snappertuna, which is very close to Rasapori Castle, and also very close to where the Yggdrasil or the ash tree in Tuna is situated. And they went onto one small island that they buried now these two golden statues together with 3 crystal balls. Filled it up and planted 3 oak trees to mark the place. And then run up to Lapland, taking the third of these golden statues with them. Yeah?
Yeah.
This was 1050. The crystal balls were made from quartz, that when the lightning is striking the granite, it's creating quartz. And inside this quartz, sometimes you can find one thing that in root they call prisma. Prisma. So they could take this quartz and carve one ball around where the prisma become the center of the ball. And inside one small dark room with one domed ceiling, and the light from one candle, this prisma, this crystal would tell about the light, and apparently, according to the stories, give you one map of the sky in the constellations, or the stars of the sky, which they must have needed up here in the north, at least during paradise time. Because in paradise time, Udenma, the very top of the planet, when the axis north and south pole were perpendicular to the sun, they had 24-hour sunshine. The sun was going around in a golden ring around Uden, the sun land, Udenma. So no night sky to read the stars. So they needed these crystal balls in order to make their astrology. Astrology. That was the function. That's what the need for these crystal balls.
Mm.
It would be nice to see them and what they can actually do.
Any idea on the dimensions of them? What size they were?
No. I can imagine like classical crystal balls that the gypsies are looking into. It must be something similar.
Right. And what about the golden box?
In the 19th, sorry, just to finish, these 3 oak trees have been looked after by Bock family for many years, and they had one system where if one old oak tree is now getting old and you see that it's reaching the end of its life, they had a system called puri, which means to cut down the old tree to one stubbe and hollow out the stubbe. Then you put in some earth and plant a cutting that you'd been taking from the original tree and bringing on so that it has small roots. So now you could plant the same tree, a cutting from the same tree, into the stubbe, like a big flower pot, and eventually the roots of this small sapling would grow back into the original roots of the system, the same place.
That sounds amazing.
And over and over and over again, coppicing it's called, I think, in English. But they replant. If in the meantime the root is sending up one root scot, you could take away the one that you've been planting, because the root scot is anyway from the tree itself is stronger and more chance to survive, and it's the original coming back up again. So in the 1960s, I think it was, in this area, the middle of these oak trees has been removed, cut down, to give the other two more room to become big, mature trees. And they run up to Lapland, the Korvatuntri, which is the border of Finland and Russia, it's a mountain way north. And Seppo and Maja, the first son and daughter, would stay in Kajaani. They stayed there for 200 years, and in 1250 they got the right to move back down again to Uudenmaa.
1048.
1248. Without going into too much detail, so before they came down, this third of these golden statues, together with the regalia of the last king and queen of Finland, were put inside one big lead box. And this lead box was put to the bottom of one sap well that was in the middle of the courtyard of the most northern king castle, smallest and most northern king castle on the planet, which is known as Kajaani Linna, Kajaani Castle, Karjalapuri. And they buried this they put into the well and then covered the whole of the courtyard up. So you would never even know a well had been existing there. In the middle of the courtyard of the castle that's sitting on a small river island in the middle of the river. There's a little bridge coming from one side. You go through the courtyard, take the water from the well, and pass on over the other side. This was completely filled up, statue put there, inside a big lead box, about 4 meters below the ground. And the family came back down to live in Uudenmaa, where they'd been staying before, but now they had to live like good Catholics and not talk about these funny heathen stories anymore. They had to get married like everybody else. And they got one new system of making children. No longer had you these 12 sons and 7 daughters. You had to get married to one lady and have all the children from the same lady. It was a new breeding system that they introduced with their writing system.
Wow. Excellent.
Under the Catholic time, it was the alderman and alder women of the village that chose those boys and girls who should get married to each other. It wasn't even the parents or grandparents who were deciding such a thing. Completely outside of the family, it's the aldermen and alderwomen of the villages that would choose which boy and which girl are getting married together.
And that was from Catholic times on, from 1250 onwards? Or from 1050 onwards?
From Catholic, from when each country became Catholic, up until Gustav Vasa here, who kicked out the Pope in 1527. Mm-hmm. And for us in England, it was this system up until we get Henry VIII, where we became Protestant. Mm-hmm. So under the Protestant writing system, we get again a new way of making children, where the grandparents are choosing which of their grandchildren should get married and which should not. And the boy, if I am one grandfather and I look my grandson, well, usually it was the first son anyway would get married, and sometimes some other sons as well, but usually the first son would get married in the Catholic time. This is in Protestant time now.
With the ladies was
The ladies, they could choose which to get married off to the next village, and which would stay in the house to help to raise the children of their brother. Yeah.
Mhm.
But the grandparents were anyway the ones who were choosing under Protestant times.
Yeah.
Up until actually we started to go to America.
Wow.
And most of the people going to America were just these boys and girls who maybe didn't get the right here to become married in our system of that time.
Oh my God. Oh.
Because if you're the first son, I have to stay there and look after the farm from my papa. I can't run off to America. But if you have 3, 4, 5 sons more there, you don't need all for the farm, and those ones who are not so needed seem to have been running across there to America. And the girls also. But now in America, when it comes to choosing or becoming married to procreate, to make the next generation, there were no grandparents around to choose for them. So they were left with no choice but to choose for themselves who they get married to. Which is very different than if it's been chosen for you. Because you choose out of your feeling for that person, attraction for that person. And love was born. 1776.
Yeah.
That come back to Europe, and now we all go according to the American way of making the next generation.
Wow.
Where we fall in love, and you get married, or they used to even get married. Even the marriage now is falling away, where we're left with a new normal family. It's not even 2.4. This nuclear family is something of the past.
Yeah.
Already.
Yeah.
Today it's one parent family. It's called.
Fascinating.
Where nobody has been asking or offering or nobody has been behind the creation. And we don't even make them anymore. They happen to us.
Yeah.
That's how conscious we are of creating next generation. It just happens to us. Fatherhood or motherhood.
Wow. That's amazing.
At least I find, like, if I think of my parents' generation, who, according to them, were both virgin when they got married, which was the norm of their time in the 1930s.
Mm-hmm.
Lost it. Yes, in those days they had the man, my father for instance, he met my mother, and he wanted to even take her out one evening. But he has the norm of that time was that he has to go and ask my grandfather or my mother's father for permission if he can take his daughter out and bring her safely back before 10 o'clock. That was normal. For everybody was doing like this.
Mm.
And if you give permission was already that it must be that the old grandfather is thinking that it's not a bad catch. Maybe he could make one couple from this. It gives him a chance to get used to the idea and think of the idea, do I now want to become a grandfather? Because at the moment he's only father with children. Children are growing up, and now they meet they fall in love or they want to get married. So now the generation before is up to that time holding the title of father. But grandfather is also one role for one small child. very important role for one small child growing up with grandfather and grandmother around also, who are giving different input to that child than a father and mother's role would do. So when he accepts and saying, yes, that you can have the hand of my daughter in marriage, he is at the same time saying that he is ready also to support what products come out from that union, the next generation. He's behind them. They belong to his family. They have his blessing. But when we stop to ask permission from our parents for the hand of their daughter, we're not asking them at all if they are ready for the next generation, and will they help, and will they look after, and do they belong. And we just tell them, hey, you're becoming grandfather now, like it or not. That is resulted where we don't even ask anymore, and we end up with this one mother with her one child who has no brothers and sisters, and doesn't really belong in the same way if you compare it to these 22,224 people it took to make one child before. All behind the creation of one child, who are there to support it through its life also.
Wow, that is.
But you can see how our information system has been changing. Also, our procreation systems have been changing.
So, how do you see the future right now then? If this is the way the world's going to, and the information system and words are being rewritten in the dictionary, modern words are coming into usage, and the like.
Story is telling us enormous detail about our past. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
It's not talking so much about future.
No.
But it's enormously detailed about our past. Especially paradise time. Which must have been when the human being, in the history of the human being on this planet, has been living closer than ever to something called nature law, or within the laws of nature, as close to nature intended us to live as possible. Because nothing changed. It was like status quo. It stayed the same all the time. The more status quo in one system, I think the more stable it is. Must have been the closer to nature it must have been, because it's been lasting longer. If you look all our different systems up to today, they're getting shorter and shorter and shorter, until some new revolution and it change again, and a new system and change again. And now we're in a time where change is faster than it's ever been before. So we are more far away from any kind of utopian society, because if you have a utopian society, it is one that doesn't need to change anymore because it's already perfect. If something is perfect, like nature is, outside of the human being at least, it's absolute perfect system. Only us are trying to find our place within that same system, because they're also breathing same air like us. So, from what I can see, the further you go back in history, and especially with this language, can take you back to a time called paradise time, before the ice time, from the Garden of Eden time. It seems to be a very, very long period of time also, where we lived in harmony with the nature for so long. But we can't go back in time. There will be no more Lemminkainen, Pirouette, Rosette family.
No, that's
this we can't repeat. So the system from paradise time cannot also be repeated. But like we were talking before about these...
Well, I'd like to say, I think the important bit here is that people have the right to know where they came from and the actual root and of the origin of humans. So carry on. I think that's where it's...
Yeah, but you were asking before about the future. So I'm trying to answer that question for you. So about you asked about what do you know about the future, and I'm saying that this story is not talking really anything about the future. It's talking about enormous detail about the past, So, like if we look in the past, in minute detail, if we know about it, we can maybe together figure out the logic path to our future based on the information from our past, how we used to live as close to nature as possible. We can't repeat that same system, but we could take the positive from the past. What else do you have to build on? It's like these Viking coming to England. If you want to now, if you think logically, you arrive to a new island, there's nobody there. You're going to populate it and create a new language at the same time. You can only populate it, but with those people that you bring with to make more and more people. You can only create a language out of whatever sounds you bring with and associations that they have. So likewise, if we want to build a future, on what do you build it? Based on what? Whose philosophy? I think we've tried most of them now. The only ones that have been left in some kind of book, we've been trying all of them. None of them seem to have been working. Otherwise we wouldn't be like we are now. So some kind of system. I think that through the language we have a chance to find out how nature intended us to live together on this ball. Because anyway, nature has been creating us, and usually nature is creating out of need. So we are also seem to be needed from a nature perspective, like we also need the nature. Is to find our role here. And through the language, I feel that we have one chance to find that out. Where then together we can take the positive from our past, from all our past. We have the history to compare with now. Had they never been leaving paradise, we would never have had all this history, these millions of years of history, to now compare with paradise, to see which system seems to have been the best anyway. We have a chance to understand what happens if when we didn't live according to some kind of nature law. We lost our paradise. But those people living in paradise could never imagine what would happen if we don't live according to this nature law. The human being needed to experience that, to create the history so that we can really continue forever, because we understand how we are supposed to live, not believe what someone is telling us how we should live with all our rules and regulations. We can understand it for ourselves. Something that you can understand, you can also feel for, because you understand that it's like that. So you feel also to support it. It's not because someone says you have to believe it. That's future. How we reach there, I don't know.
So, right. Well, this tape, that's a very interesting explanation of things, starting from the gold box and ending up with understanding the system of paradise time in today's world. But the golden box in Snapper Tuna, do the church know that they're there, which is why they own the island and won't let them be dug up? Why won't they let them be dug up?
Church story. 1987 I came here first time. We didn't know about this temple at this stage. All I had been hearing about before in Goa when I met Eeyore was that his family had been burying a couple of golden statues of goats. Two in Snappertuna in the year 1050 and the third in Kayani in 1250. I thought, great, first story I ever came across, a creation story that also offers material proof, doesn't just ask you to believe it or not. You can also physically prove this story, not just through the language, but as well as with the language there was material proof. So I thought, okay, this is where it seems a bit more further investigation needed, because all other stories ask you to believe and to have faith, and it's called religion. So I came here, and I thought, great, we come here, we dig up these books, and there we go. Wasn't quite like that, because first of all, where these two oak trees, the remaining oak trees, are situated is in one place called Offerlund, which translated means offering grove. Yeah?
On an island called Digere.
On one island called Digere. It was also one island at this time.
Yes, it's on Litchfield today, it's an enormous island.
Yes, but the Offerlund itself.
It's on the island.
Is it an island on the island?
No, it's an island called Digere, and one part of this Digere has one shore, and it's dock to the shore is the Offerlund.
There you go. Called Offerlund.
That's a forest on the island.
It's one little grove of trees on one island
Called Digerö.
next to the shore, called Offerlund, on an island called Digerö. Ö means island. Digerö. Diger Island. I went to get permission, only just to get permission to use a metal detecting machine there in 1987. I rang to the church because I knew that his family had been donating this Offerlund to the local Snappertuna church in the 1930s. Now, he was born 1942. So before he was born in the 1930s, some of the members of his family, before moving away, had been donating this small Offerlund to the church because they knew the church would look after it. So I thought, okay, I ring to the church then and find out a little bit more. And on that telephone call with the priest in Snappertuna, I find out that it has been already mentioned in their church book from the 1930s also. One golden statue. It's even got some kind of mention in their church book of that little church. This is before he was born, so it was the first piece of physical evidence that, for myself personally, that I'd been finding outside of what he has been telling to me.
Right.
He tells that his family have been burying two golden statues in one place called Snappertuna in the year 1050. You have to believe him or not.
Yeah.
So now I find out in the 1930s it's already mentioned in one local church book from this area that I know has been. So the statue is already known by the local people, or the legend of it, from before he was born. It's even mentioned in the church book.
Right.
So it cannot be, for me personally, it cannot be some kind of fantasy of Igor Bock,
Yeah.
because it's also mentioned in one church book, and the local people there have been hearing about it.
Yeah.
Personally, it was like the first little piece of thing outside of him, evidence that maybe he's not making all this crazy story up. 1987. So I called to the priest and asked him for permission to come with a metal detecting machine. Not digging or anything, just metal detecting machine to check over this Offerlund. The priest said, well, I think that to give you permission for that, you would need to contact the Bishop of Finland, a Mr. Wikström, Bishop Wikström, Bishop of Finland. So I rang, telephoned to this Bishop of Finland, and he said, well, actually, you know, this Offerlund has got one conservation order on it. Therefore, it belongs to the Department of Conservation in the government. So I had to go through all these different offices there in the government to find out someone who has the authority to give us only permission to go with one metal detecting machine to this place. They said, you know, this area really, it belongs to the church. It's not our authority at all. The government.
Around in a circle then.
So they sent me back to the bishop, who said, in that case, you should ring to the priest there in Snappertuna, who I started with already in the beginning.
Oh, really?
And the priest, of course, said, of course you can come with your metal detecting machine. But this whole procedure took me 10 days, telephone calls, just to get permission to go with the metal detecting machine, which we did one morning. Soma Laxman Tucker, Jim Chesner and myself, together with one metal detecting machine man with his metal detecting machine. On car to Snappertuna, and on the way in this car, the metal detecting machine man had been telling us, you know, that if there is a lot of clay here, we will not be able to get much of a reading. So we thought, okay, we're going for nothing, but anyway, let's go and check it out. We arrived there to find one journalist there from a newspaper that the priest had been calling. Who ended up taking photograph of us, and we end up in the newspaper, this photograph, standing there with our metal detecting machine that did not give us any bleep bleep, because one root of one oak tree is as big as its crown. And these are two huge mature oak trees with 5 meter crown.
Yeah.
And it's all clay around, with this small like rock island out of all this fields of clay around that is sticking up. It's like an island of rock sticking up with all this mud around. So the further you go away from that little middle of the upper room, which is the bedrock, is like the clay is the ocean, the deeper you have to go. So we didn't get any bleep bleep from our machine in 1987. But they would not give us permission to dig because it's a conservation area. We didn't get any permission.
And no one's been back there since with a different metal detecting machine, or?
They must be entangled in the enormous root system of these two oak trees, like inside all the roots, because they were exactly growing above them. So eventually the roots would be gone. They would have been set on the bedrock oak trees that in the last nearly 1,000 years will have been enclosing now these two statues.
So what about... Right.
The museum have been told about these statues already in 1984 by Eeyore. All the authorities have been informed also of Kayani in 1984.
So what about Kayani?
Kayani is inside one ruin of the smallest, most Nordic king castle on the planet. On a river island, 600 kilometers north from Helsinki, beside a little town called Kayani. The river island has been used for one supporting pillar of a motorway bridge that crosses now the river. That pillar, the base of that pillar is only 3 meters away from the old well where the lead box and the regalia and the statue were put inside. 3 meters away from it. But because it's a castle ruin, it means it falls under the cultural ministry, who have a department called Musevarasto, or the museum, who have a department inside the museum who are over all ancient monuments and sites. They have to look after them. And they have been a department that have the honour to refuse our permission over all these years, even though we have had 3 independent SIR, subsurface interface radar surveys done of the whole island. All 3, over an 11-year period, all 3 radar surveys have been giving positive result. The last one is even showing that it is 2 meters high, sitting on the bedrock, massive metal object, like a big box, that you can see on the internet. Still published there. But still, for some reason, we don't get permission to dig it up.
Right. And do you think
They have a plan now, just for the record. We've been hearing that the planning stage for removing the old bridge,
Mhm.
possibly building one new bridge or using one existing bridge further up the river, has been passed. So the planning stage has already been passed to remove the old bridge and build a new one somewhere else. This has been confirmed by the Road and Water Department here in Finland, but that they are now just waiting for the funding of this project, which they say could take up to 2 or 3 years from now. The
They're
musical
waiting
master-
for the funding.
the funding for this now. It's been past the planning stage, and now they wait for the government to fund the project so they can start the work. That, they say, could take 2 or 3 years. You know how the bureaucracy moves.
So the townspeople of Kajaani know this Bock is there, and they're keen to have it there.
They
For
want
it
to
to be
they want to keep it there.
They want
When
to,
it's
well, they
dug
will
up,
keep
they
it
want
there.
to keep
Yeah,
it
yeah,
there.
yeah.
They don't want it going back
Because
down
it'll be
there.
restored castle. No, wouldn't never. Yeah.
They want to restore the castle, or at least half restore it, but at least restore the castle back to one white castle with 2 towers, one Boer tower and one Koer tower, sitting in the middle of a beautiful river island in a beautiful nature, trees around, and inside there should be this golden Bock and the regalia of Eris and Mai, King and Queen of Finland.
Wow.